and welcome back to the podcast. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. So if you're new, welcome. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this message with your friends. We've got an important topic to dive into today, which is finding peace in a chaotic world. So let's get to it. We all have experienced chaos in our lives. Whether it's stress at work or conflict in our relationships or just feeling overwhelmed by everything happening around us. But the good news is that God has given us clear guidance on how to find true peace, even in the midst of the noise. So let's start today with the book of Wisdom. In Wisdom chapter 1 verses 16 through chapter 2 verses 1, and then again in verses 12 through 22, we see people who reject God's ways. They mock the righteous and think they can't control their own destiny. They're blind to God's bigger plan, and as a result, they have no peace. But this passage reminds us that God's plan is always greater than what we can see. Even when we face trials or mistreatment, God is working something bigger for us. We don't need to worry about what others do or what others say. We can rest in knowing that God sees us and has a reward for those who remain faithful to Him. That's the first step to finding peace, trusting that God is in control. Even when life feels out of control, we can find control in God. Next, let's look at Psalm chapter 54, verses 1 through 7. Here we find David crying out to God in a moment of danger. He's surrounded by enemies. But instead of panicking, he calls on God. He says, "Behold, God is my helper." When we feel like life is closing in on us, we need to follow David's example. We need to trust that God is with us, ready to help. He's bigger than any problem we face, and when we trust in Him, we find peace that nothing else can offer. Now in James chapter 3, verses 16 through chapter 4, verse 6, we're reminded how jealousy and selfishness create conflict. When we're focused on our own desires, whether that's money or recognition or power, we lose our peace and our relationships suffer. James calls us to seek God's wisdom instead. He says the wisdom from above is peaceable, gentle, open to season, and full of mercy. When we invite God's wisdom into our lives, it changes how we relate to others. It helps us overcome the conflict and disorder that come from chasing after our own selfish desires. Seeking God's wisdom brings peace into our relationships and our hearts. Finally, we turn to the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9, verses 30 through 37. Here, the disciples are arguing about who is the greatest. But Jesus steps in and flips the script. He says, if anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. In a world that tells us to always strive for the top, Jesus reminds us that true peace and greatness come through humility. When we stop trying to push ourselves forward and instead focus on serving others, we experience God's grace. That's where real peace comes from, humility and service, not from trying to prove ourselves. So how can we live this out? Well, it starts by trusting in God's bigger plan like we saw in the book of Wisdom. It's about turning to Him in times of trouble, just like David did in the Psalms. It's asking for His wisdom as James taught us and walking in humility like Jesus showed His disciples. If we follow this path, we will find the peace that the world can't give. This week, I challenge you to take these scriptures to heart. Trust God in the chaos. Seek His wisdom and serve others with humility. Now, before we wrap this up, I want to encourage you to check out another video we've done about trusting God for guidance. It's a great follow-up to today's message, and I think it will really bless you as you continue to seek peace and direction from God. And finally, if you haven't already, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this message with your friends. Let's spread this word of peace and hope to as many people as possible. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.